Good afternoon, everyone. We're ready to start our program. Again, I apologize for the delay. Welcome to our Vietnam Veterans Commemoration Pin Award Ceremony. Please rise for the posting of the colors, the singing of our national anthem, reveille and assembly, our invocation, and the Pledge of Allegiance. Color Guard, post the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Bugler, sound reveille and assembly. Please bow your heads. Heavenly and gracious Father, we humbly ask for your blessings on those gathered today. We especially ask you to remember the men and women who served in the Vietnam War and their families and loved ones. We gather today to remember and honor these patriots who manifested the courage to serve in an unpopular war and who exemplified the bravery of each serviceman and servicewoman who has served this great nation. We ask this in your name. Amen. I pledge allegiance. Please be seated. Welcome everyone to our Vietnam Commemoration Pin Ceremony. Before we have some remarks, I just want to make a couple introductions. First of all, I want to introduce a good friend of mine, a devoted advocate of veterans, not just in Montgomery County, but across Pennsylvania, and that's Commissioner Joe Gale. Commissioner Gale. I also want to introduce Mrs. Philadelphia. I believe she's still here, Brittany Ravel. Brittany is in the competition for the Mrs. Pennsylvania pageant, and you're probably wondering, why she's here. And the reason she's here is that she is the only candidate in this pageant that has as her platform the care of our veterans. And this is, of course, an issue that is very near and dear to all of our hearts. And I want to thank Brittany for bringing this issue into the pageant and talking across Pennsylvania, not just about veterans, but the needs of veterans, not just Vietnam veterans, but all veterans. And Brittany, thank you for being here today, and thank you for bringing your two beautiful children. Thank you. Today's ceremony focuses on the sacrifices and honoring our Vietnam veterans. However, we have a World War II veteran with us today, a constituent of mine, served in the United States Marine Corps, was a gunner in the Pacific Theater of Operations, married to his wife Joan for 68 years. He had a very serious loss. His son died not 3 weeks ago. And I want to thank Dr. Levin for his service to our great nation and for being here today. Dr. Levin, Dr. Aaron Levin. We have a couple of speakers today, and I'm going to be the first one, and I promise to be brief. During the divisive decades of the 1960s and the 70s, our community here in Montgomery County and Lower Bucks was like many others across America. As the war in Vietnam raged, people were divided over our involvement in Southeast Asia. And because of that personal conflict, we failed to honor our Vietnam veterans. The men and women who served in Vietnam returned home to an openly contemptuous and hostile climate. And for that, I apologize. I'm not so sure anyone ever apologized to you for the way that you were treated, but I'm apologizing today on behalf of our country, our Commonwealth, and our community. It's taken more than 4 decades, but today our community recognizes the service and sacrifices made during the Vietnam War. Those who know me know that as a veteran myself of the war in Iraq, I hold veterans in the highest regard, and it's my honor to be with you here today as you receive recognition you so rightly deserve for serving our country. One of my favorite movies is Forrest Gump, and in that movie, Forrest Gump said, and I quote, "Some of America's finest young men served in the Vietnam War." He was correct, and the Vietnam veterans gathered here today are amongst them. Today we're presenting you with a commemorative pin to honor your service during the Vietnam War. The pin is a special reminder of how grateful we are for the sacrifices you have made in defense of our nation. I want to acknowledge the sacrifices that each and every one of you has made. As a state legislator, and as your fellow American, and as a fellow veteran, I sincerely thank you for your service. I want to interject that I wouldn't dare come to the ceremony without getting a regulation haircut this morning. So, it is because of our veterans standing before us who stood ready and willing to make the ultimate sacrifice if called upon that our constitutional freedoms have been protected. In Scripture, we have heard, we read, "There's no greater love a man can have than to lay down his life for his friend." And I always say our veterans, and especially our Vietnam veterans, can go one better. What about men and women that lie down their life for people they don't even know, like many of our brothers and sisters did during the Vietnam War? We are eternally grateful to all of you who served our nation in the armed forces, and we thank your families who know what it means to have a loved one in harm's way. You all deserve and will always have the respect of the American people. Thank you. God bless our heroes. God bless the United States of America. I want to ask Colonel William Griffith, the wing commander of the 111th Attack Wing, Pennsylvania Air National Guard, to please come forward. Colonel Griffin, while you're coming to the podium, I just want to thank you, sir, for your support in bringing today's program to fruition. Thank you very much, sir.
Wow, this is awesome being here. So they have trouble keeping me tethered to the podium here, but I like to be, because what I want to be is I want to be right down in there amongst you folks. With Brittany, you already won. Just based on what you're going to do for veterans, you won. I don't think anybody in the room disagrees with that. So I had a couple notes. I'm going to skip those. I'm going to speak from the heart because when I come here and I get talking to folks, I'm moved. And it's truly, I think we were talking about it right up here in the front, you can feel it in this room. You can feel the energy, the passion, the goodness. That rendition of our national anthem was spectacular, with the whole room singing. That stuff chokes me up. This is a slice of Americana right here, and this is the stuff that we all love. It's what you all served for, and it's why we take very seriously and we do the hard work to carry on the tradition that you folks handed off to us, and we take that very seriously. So this morning I'm talking to one of my brothers on the phone, a couple of my brothers, my sister. I'm from a big family. So I'm talking to them, and I told them what I'm doing. Said, oh yeah, I'm going in. I'm just going to say thanks to, coming to the base for this Vietnam Veterans ceremony today. And each one of them said, give them a hug from me. So my thing is, when I see somebody wearing a Vietnam veteran hat, I always make it a point to go, thank you, give you a handshake, and my words are the same. I can't get you caught up. I know you were shorted a few. A lot of the appreciation that we receive and the warm welcome and the homecomings that we receive when we come back in this day and age is not what you got. We get that when we go out into the restaurants and somebody buys our lunch or whatever. You didn't get your lunch bought. So we all owe all of you and your families a lot of catching up to do. So my goal, my objective today is to give every one of you a handshake or a hug and just say thanks and just say we're going to try to get you one closer to the number of handshakes and the number of hugs that were due you and are overdue and will never get caught up. But please know that folks understand your sacrifice, your service, what you've done, what you came home to, and how it's different from what we have come home from or come home to. We get that, we appreciate it. This is your day. Again, why are we here? We're here for you. This is your day, and I'm just here to support it. And I'm just so grateful and thankful that I get to shake your hand, look you in the eye, say thanks, and give you a hug. I can tell you we love you. We love your service. We love your families. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker. But that's my mission. That's my message today. Really is just thank you. There could not be a better use of this room and this base today than what it's being used for right here. Thanks.
Thank you, Colonel Griffin. I would ask Michelle Lockman, who is a Chief of Staff for Congressman Brendan Boyle, to please come up and express the Congressman's greetings. While she's coming to the podium, I just want to tell you that I don't think there's a congressman in Washington who is more devoted to veterans issues than Brendan Boyle. And he's collaborated with us on many pieces of legislation. He was a colleague of mine in the House of Representatives in Harrisburg, and I'm very grateful for his ongoing support of veterans and veterans issues. Michelle?
On behalf of Congressman Brendan Boyle and our nation, I would like to honor and thank each veteran for your service to our country, to the Vietnam War. The pin that you received today should be a constant reminder that this is a national initiative, which should serve as the country's lasting memento of thanks. The Congressman wishes he could be here himself to extend his deepest appreciation for your dedication, your integrity, and your outstanding service to the United States of America. The message on the back of the pin, which will sit closest to your heart, says it all. A grateful nation thanks and honors you.
Thank you, Michelle. Is Peter Chung here from Congressman Fitzpatrick's? I'm going to ask, can you please come up, Peter? Many of you know that Brian Fitzpatrick is a law enforcement professional on the federal level, served several tours of duty in the Middle East, in Iraq, and he has also been a great advocate and a great ally on our veterans initiatives, and we're very grateful to him. I'm going to ask Peter to make some remarks.
Good afternoon. It's never lost on me how important the Vietnam veterans and their service to this country is to our community. The efforts of the veterans delivered future generations a nation seen as a beacon of freedom and prosperity around the world. Without knowing the outcome, they risked everything, fully prepared to give the last full measure of devotion to their nation. The founding of our republic was predicated on our veterans serving as a source of pride for our nation. George Washington aptly observed, "The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional as to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their nation." Each of us owes Vietnam veterans a debt of gratitude, and those remembered on the memorial of all those every generations who have served in conflict regions around the world. Since the founding of our fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, husbands, and wives has answered duty's call and served bravely in the protection of freedoms we often taken for granted. In his second inaugural address, President Lincoln, looking to the wounds that needed to be healed as the Civil War drew to a close, charged our nation to care for him who shall have borne the battle. This is a duty we must not take lightly. We should never forget their service, nor should we never forget the service of those who cannot be here with us today, those who made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our nation. Again, thanking our veterans, our Vietnam veterans, for their service is not enough. As President John F. Kennedy once said, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. As we honor those today, we say a prayer that those that are serving now around the world return home safely to their family, friends, and the nation that they love. It is truly an honor to be here for this event, and in closing, I finish with this. Every time we are called, we answer, "Here I am." We answer knowing that the freedom of our country depends on our actions, and fully aware that we answer at our own peril, and still we answer, "Here I am." Every day, we grieve for our veterans that have not returned and remember our fallen, but we still press on and still say, "Here I am." As a veteran with 4 tours, if it wasn't for you, we would not have the welcomes that you did not receive. And thank you for your service, and thank you for everything you have done to make sure that future generations of veterans do not receive or will never again. So, on behalf of Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick and all proud Americans, I say thank you for your service. God bless these United States of America.
Our next 2 speakers, by anybody's definition, would qualify as being heroes. And it wasn't easy to get their biographies. Their real biographies are quite extensive and are quite impressive, but they're both as humble as you will find of an American. The next speaker is my good friend, Captain Dave Christian. Dave was born in Florida, raised in Bucks County in Levittown. Graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School, Villanova University, Rutgers Law School, Middlebury College, with a degree in Russian. Dave's military career, he was the youngest commissioned officer since the Civil War at the age of 18. Captain of the United States Army at 20, medically retired for wounds in combat, to include gunshots, rocket-propelled grenade wounds, and 40% of his body burnt with napalm. By the way, Dave wrote a book. If you're looking for some really good reading, it's called Victor 6 by David A. Christian. Again, Dave was medically discharged with full rank and privileges at the rank of captain at the age of 21. Dave's military decorations include twice recommended for the Medal of Honor. He received the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, Bronze Star, Air Medal for 25 combat assaults into hot landing zones, and 7 Purple Hearts. Numerous other awards for valor and honor. If you get a chance to talk to Dave today, you'll see some of his awards on his jacket. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce Captain David A. Christian, an American hero.
Thank you. I don't know if this is on or not. I only have a couple words here. But 50 years have passed. Before I say anything, I would like to thank Tom and his assistant, Bill. My younger kid sister died this week, and it was a funeral all week for us, and it just wrapped up yesterday in Philadelphia. And Tom came down from Harrisburg, and he attended the funeral services of my kid sister. So I want to thank you, State Representative Tom Murt. He's really a man. I think about it. I saw our commander here of the base, Bill, and I could see him choked up. I could see him speaking with emotions. I could see him speaking from his heart. And it's just very moving that as a Vietnam veteran, 50 years ago, I didn't care how anybody spoke, I'll be honest with you. I came back on a C-141 on a stretcher, and they said they were sending me to a burn hospital, and then I'm being moved from one burn hospital in Texas to another burn hospital, and Walter Reed to a ward to Valley Forge General Hospital. And the sergeant was shouting at everybody on the bus there, and he said, "Of course you know what VFGH stands for." And I thought it meant Valley Forge General Hospital, and he said, "Very few go home." So I thought, geez, I don't want to go to this place, you know. But it was different. Yes, it was different. But we went as individuals to that war, if you remember. We went as one kid on the block and another kid on the block. It wasn't a unit that went, and it wasn't a unit that came back. And I don't think that, and ladies and gentlemen, you all know, many of you here have enough years behind you that you know there's no such thing as a coincidence. I think that they saw in World War I and they saw in World War II that if you let the military come back as units, they'll politically become strong. So we came back one at a time to our neighborhoods. Some people stayed in their rooms. Some people committed suicide. The suicide rate for Vietnam veterans were more than the number on the wall in Washington, D.C. More than 58,000 men committed suicide from the Vietnam War. Thinking about issues such as Agent Orange and post-traumatic stress, I helped write the legislation for post-traumatic stress legislation, PTSD. I helped write the legislation for Agent Orange. My office was broke into. They stole different things out of my office. Who was they? I was bringing big legislation, which was going to be millions of dollars, for my brother who died, my younger kid brother who's disabled, and for all my brothers and sisters who are in this room, and in many rooms across America. Somebody took that documentation. Right after I testified before the United States Senate, my office was pilfered. And the only thing that was taken, there was money on my desk, was not taken. All the documentation and reference to Agent Orange. And they said people that have PTSD were malingerers. And I had to fight all those issues. and not just myself. I had a lot of people that I knew were standing shoulder to shoulder with me. Newer veterans that were coming back. We knew what happened to us, and we made certain it wasn't going to happen to our sons and our grandsons. And we stood shoulder to shoulder. We don't care if you're a cook, a baker, a candlestick maker, if you're in uniform, if you took the oath to say that you were going to serve your country, we're going to proudly welcome you home. I tried to go to Germany. I went to the Pentagon, I'll never forget this, and I said, "Ich spreche Deutsch. Ich spreche Deutsch, aber nicht so good." And the guy scratching his head, the sergeant, he said, "What are you saying?" I said, I speak German, but not so very good. I think I should go to Germany. And he took me over to this major, and I thought, I did it. I'm going to Germany. He said, "Say it again for the major." And I said it again, and they both put their hands out. And I said, "I convinced them. I'm going to Germany." And they said, "Congratulations. Hopefully you find a German colony in Vietnam." I never found that German colony, ladies and gentlemen. But as I look back, I think the sting of battle, was the sting of battle different from the sting of battle in no man's land in World War I? The sting of battle in Europe and D-Day and Iwo Jima? Was the sting of battle different than the sting of battle at Pork Chop Hill in Korea? The sting of battle as we go all the way up through the different battles? Then why in God's name did our generation fall between the cracks? Many, many people said we lost. We lost the war. When I left, my unit was winning. When I left, I didn't know one American unit that was losing a battle or a war. And what was our mission in Vietnam? Our mission was to stop communism. After World War II, communism was centrally located in Moscow. And by the time Vietnam came around, almost 1/3 of the world, there was a spread of communism. There was a theory, a domino effect. And this domino effect was going to take the world. President Eisenhower, President Johnson, everyone said we got to stop communism. Ladies and gentlemen, would you believe we accomplished our mission? Communism never moved further than Vietnam. And the Soviet Empire fell because of the people in this room. The blood, the guts, the sacrifices for what you did. I don't care if you stood guard in the Berlin Wall. I don't care if you were in Korea. I don't care if you were in Vietnam in the steamy jungles. Didn't matter where you were in the world. Just think, the empire, the Soviet Empire, and the push of communism was stopped because of the Vietnam veterans. I did my mission. I took my bullets in my body, as many people in this room did. And I can say proudly that we accomplished our mission. Mission first, duty first, honor. I would just like to end on a few words. Some people quoted different people here, but I remember a statement that JFK would use all the time. And he would say, poor is a nation that has no heroes, but beggared is a nation that has and forgets. And I'd like to add one line from David Christian to that. Wretched is a nation that has and mistreats. Let us not ever mistreat another generation of veterans. Let us be the standard bearers, the vanguard. God bless everybody in this room. I'm proud to get my 50th pin, and I'm sure each and every one in this room is proud to get theirs. Thank Tom Murt, thank Ralph Galletti, thank everybody in this room. There's a lot of blood, guts, and sacrifice here. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. God bless America.
Our final speaker today is Ralph Galletti, born and raised in Philadelphia and Delaware County, proud graduate of St. James High School in Chester, class of 1966. Also a graduate of St. Joe's University, with a Bachelor of Science degree in 1970, commissioned to Second Lieutenant United States Air Force through the ROTC program. As a member of the Air Force ROTC program, he was a distinguished military graduate, president of the Arnold Air Society, and recipient of the St. Joseph's University Dean's Award. I want to tell you that I'm sure the 4 years that Colonel Galletti was part of the ROTC program were very, very difficult years on college campuses in this country. And he stuck it out and got his commission in 1970. Another part of this biography that's incomplete is that Ralph was shot down over Vietnam, was captured by the North Vietnamese, and was a prisoner of war. He'll talk to us a little bit about that. Colonel Galletti.
I love it when I get promoted on the spot. Good afternoon. I want to thank Representative Murt, Staff Sergeant retired, United States Army, for inviting me today. Thanks for everybody that's here. Those on active duty, Guard, Reserve, and family members, thanks for your service. Vietnam veterans, welcome home. I want to talk a little bit about duty, honor, and sacrifice. I apologize, my memory is not as good as Dave Christian's, so I have to read my speech. I want to share a little bit about my experiences as a prisoner of war and give you a sense of why it's an important part for me, you can't hear me, to honor the brave men and women that served our country proudly during the Vietnam War at this really difficult time. The key thing is thank you for never forgetting. You also notice there's the POW MIA table in the front. I still marvel at almost 50 years later that we still see the table and the flag being proudly shown. Just some facts for everybody. Vietnam period is basically 1961 to 75. And during that period, over 9 million military personnel served on active duty somewhere across the world. Of that, 2.7 million Americans actually served in Southeast Asia. About 1/3 of us are still alive. And 7,400 of them were women, mostly nurses. At the height of the conflict in 1968, we had 543,000 troops in Southeast Asia at one time. In total, we lost over 58,000 of our fellow citizens. 61% of those that died were 21 years of age or younger. About 900 were prisoners of war at war's end, and 2,300 were listed as missing in action. As you heard earlier, when our troops came home from the Vietnam War in the 60s and 70s, either on leave or after their duty terminated, most could not wear their uniforms in public. They weren't ashamed, it just wasn't safe. It was easier than facing humiliation. They encountered an angry and hostile American public because they were toxic by association with the government and the military. A good day in many cases was being ignored, maybe not being spat on. After a while, being called baby killers and drug addicts and warmongers would take its toll. Hostility and indifference marked their return, hence the purpose for today. When a young soldier left the military back then, they were not welcome to join the various veterans organizations because they were too contagious. When the same young veteran who had just proudly served his country tried to find a job, he often had to conceal his military service. How do you think it must have felt to fight in battle, watch your brothers die in combat, serve your country, return home with dignity, and yet not be honored or appreciated for your service? Once again, the purpose for today. They were all rightfully proud, but they couldn't show it. For decades, it was veterans taking care of veterans, brothers helping their own. There was no welcome home. By contrast, when I came home from Hanoi, there were about 600 of us. We were welcomed home, but it was 600 out of 3 million. So rightfully, things have changed. We now respect our service members. As citizens, we could disagree with the government and the war and the military, but at least now we respect our soldiers and seamen and airmen and Marines that have honorably served our country. My situation as a prisoner of war was different than most veterans. My life was in a cement room that was 6 feet by 8 feet at times, no windows, no lights. We really didn't know where we were. You're really totally alone, separated from your comrades, separated from your family, separated from the real world. Toilet was gone, sink was gone, uniform was gone, food was gone, brothers were gone, freedoms were gone. The only constants really were isolation and fear, beatings and starvation, interrogations. Your only companions at times were the mosquitoes and the geckos and the rats. But in my case, I was a military officer. I had really good training. Some of my colleagues went to military academies. We felt that we were ready for all this, that we could do our best. How wrong we were. You were a captive of the enemy. You were a prisoner of war. What do you do now? And now that your chance was just one of resistance and survival, communications and escape. What will happen to me the next day or tomorrow? Interrogation and torture, propaganda. And many of us, we were missing in action for a while, so we could have been killed, and no one would be the wiser. I remember saying to myself, what the hell am I doing here? And what do I do now? It took a day, but after a day, I stopped feeling sorry for myself and beginning to act like a military officer and realizing that my mission had changed from being a combat officer to now being a prisoner of war. And now my guidebook was the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct are 6 simple articles designed to help military service members serve honorably as prisoners of war and still resist your captors' efforts to exploit you. And you remember some of them. It talks about you'll only be required to give name, rank, serial number, date of birth. You'll make every attempt to escape. If you're in charge, you will lead. You will not accept any special favors from the enemy. But let me read you the first one. I am an American fighting in the forces which guard my country and our way of life. I am prepared to give my life in their defense. By contrast, the military oath we take as officers and enlisted, that the President of the United States takes, the Congressman takes, there's nothing in there that ever says, I am prepared to give my life in their defense. 6 simple articles, easy to understand, tough to execute. I would spend the first week in isolation with starvation and interrogation and sleep deprivation and threatened with death if I didn't cooperate. I spent 75 days in solitary where I learned that I was not only nothing special, but I was not in the least bit entertaining. And I was overall a POW for about 14 months, most of which was what I consider an endurance test. Days of boredom mixed with fear. And during captivity, you are, stripped of all your dignity and military rank. Their job was to humble you, and your job was to never be humiliated. Even though you had no freedoms and you were deprived of everything, you still had a job to do. That was resist to the best of your ability. However, when you have to beg for water and toilet paper, you know you've reached the bottom of the food chain. But even though we were POWs, we had our job to do. It was to resist, and it was resist to the extent that the more we could disrupt their operations in the north, the fewer of them were shooting at you in the south. But days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months. And 2 really powerful things, emotions that happened during that period of time is fear and guilt. And on top of all the POW stuff, you then had to throw in this mixture of fear and uncertainty and guilt. And guilt was things like, I never should have allowed myself to be shot down, should never have been captured, how many other airmen or soldiers might have been killed trying to recover me. I should have been stronger during those interrogation periods. What do I tell my fellow POWs if I ever see one about how I measured up to the Code of Conduct? And every POW will tell you they have a breaking point somewhere in an interrogation where you just literally no longer have the physical or mental ability to resist. It's a shameful thing to realize how weak you are and how poor you performed. Once again, this guilt thing really is debilitating. But I want to tell you why it was important for POWs to fight and endure this treatment. And part of it was the Code of Conduct, and part is because we were military officers and we had this new mission about resisting, but also to return home with honor. But also it was because we really couldn't do less than our best than to continue to honor our fellow soldiers, you folks here today, who fought for us and were still fighting and dying in battle while we were in captivity. How shameful would it be for us to act helplessly when we knew so many were fighting to save us? How can we live with ourselves after so many lives were lost? How can we not give our all each day, just like all American servicemen had done and were still doing? So we survived and resisted, and we fought every day to overcome fear and guilt, complete the mission, fight to the end, never give up, to know the importance of resiliency and character, and to return home with honor. Former POW Sam Johnson said, "Until you've had your freedom denied, only then do you realize what we have in this great country of ours. Freedom has a taste to those who fought and almost died that the protected will never know." After I was released in March of 1973 from the Hanoi Hilton, myself and 600 others from Hanoi were welcomed home, about 600 of us. It was quite a homecoming, and yet it was really uncomfortable and distorted. For some reason, it seemed okay to be a returning POW and get welcomed home, but it was not okay to be an average soldier. Where was the welcome for them? They served with the same honor and integrity that we did. They were proud of their country, proud of their flag, proud of their military service, but no welcome home. It was many more years until the Vietnam Veteran Memorial was built, that the POW-MIA flag was flown with pride and distinction, and maybe a soldier felt that they were finally welcomed home, finally had a chance to show their pride. So when you see these folks in veterans organizations and events like this, some of them are really old, like me, some with beards and ponytails, riding their Harleys. Thank them for their service. Read the patches on their uniforms. It's their credo, their badge of honor. When you go to a parade or a civic event and you see members of various veterans groups, make sure you thank them for their service. When you go home tonight, thank a family member. They're proud Americans. Please remember that our service members served bravely and wanted nothing more than to return home with honor and dignity. For those that didn't return home, we will never forget. You heard earlier, there's no greater love than to give your life for your friend. I get the opportunity to speak at a lot of civic and veterans events, and generally present at every event are Vietnam veterans. And I think about the irony that today those who helped us remember most are those who were most forgotten. They refuse to let us forget. I got a coin from a Vietnam veteran a while back, and the inscription on the coin says it all. "We have your backs here at home. Never again will an American warrior be scorned or ignored." So, veterans are just ordinary people, but sometimes we're called upon to do some extraordinary things. You heard about Dave Christian as an example. There are 300,000 men and women buried in Arlington, 58,000 names on the wall in D.C., another 646 neighbors at the Philadelphia Memorial. And since our nation has been founded, over 1 million men and women have given our lives in the service of our country. So to all Vietnam veterans and veterans here today, Vietnam vets especially, welcome home. Families, the great nation and local community, thank you for your enduring service. And I thank you for the great privilege to speak with you today. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we're going to commence with the pin ceremony. We're going to ask Colonel Griffith to please award the pin, assisted by Captain Dave Christian and Ralph Galati. We're going to call the veterans forward in increments of about 12 to 15. We're going to ask John Fleming to please line you up across the front of the room, and then Colonel Griffith will commence with the ceremony. Following veterans, please pose front and center. Vincent Aquaviva, Jr. Rick Ansbro. Joseph Bachman. Ronald S. Baker. John Baer. William F. Beath. Keith Beck, Sr. Staff Sergeant James Benigo Jr., Manuel M. Cabral, Jim Callan, Larry N. Choylin Jr., Anthony Bush. Round of applause for these veterans, please. First rank dismissed. While our veterans are going back to their seats, we do have a professional photographer here today from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, John Dilley. John is an outstanding artist among his other trades, and I just want to thank him for being here today all the way from Harrisburg. Thanks, John. Following veterans are asked to please come forward and pose front and center. Cosmo Sinkyu Sr., Blaze A. Sinkyu, John Cody, Tom Concannon, Francis Darnell, Jean Dyer, Ronald Engler, Bruce Farrow, Robert Franks, James M. Frank, Alfred Garrison Jr., George T. Hannigan, Peter Hassan. Yes, Colonel, please commence. Round of applause for these veterans, please. Rank number 2 dismissed. The following veterans, please post front and center. Norman Hawks Jr., Thomas Heim, Barbara Gellenberg, Michael Hirsch, Jim Holwood, Frederick Helbig, Thomas R. Herman Sr., Richard James, Alan Caruso, William Kellerman, Ben Kletchek, Lee Knight, and Matthew Krez. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to come up close to the front of the room and take a picture, please feel free. Don't be shy. Please feel free to come in the main aisle too. Can we have a round of applause for these veterans? Third rank dismissed. The following veterans, post front and center: Ori V. Christel, David Nisi, Richard Kaliga, Donald Leather Barrow, Joseph F. Lynch III, Anthony Malloy, Edward Meminsky, Patrick Mishner, Bernard Markaki, Thomas Marsden, John McCollum, Hugh McGinnis, and Harry McKenna. Fourth rank dismissed. The following veterans are kindly asked to please post front and center. Francis McEwen, Thomas Patrick McLaughlin, Robert McFarland, Ron Melico, Dorothy Michael, Juan Morales, Patrick J. Mishner, Myron Malkarski, Emil Ettinger, Reverend Brian O'Neill, Kevin O'Rourke, Thomas Raypass. Round of applause for these veterans, please. Fifth rank, please be seated. Dismissed. The following veterans are asked to please post front and center. James Roach, Joseph Paul Schaffer, John Seipel, Ollie Stallworth, William Nielsen, Sylvester Soshinsky, Rudolph George Tellman, Robert D. Watkins, Brian Woodburn, Charles Yestat Jr., William Zenzer, Gabriel Zini. Post front and center. Can we have a round of applause for these veterans, please? Six ranks dismissed. We're going to ask the following veterans to please come forward for final recognition. Richard Basilo, Michael Caffrey, Richard Brown, Paul Ferner, and Dr. Aaron Levin. Please come forward. Post front and center. Ladies and gentlemen, while these veterans are forming a rank in the front of the room here, is there any Vietnam veteran we have not recognized? Bill, could you please give your name to Patty? Over here, Patty. Thank you. And William Keyburn, post front and center. Round of applause for these veterans, please. Seventh rank, dismissed. Ladies and gentlemen, before we conclude our program, are there any other Vietnam veterans here that we have not recognized? We do not want to leave anyone behind. Okay, at this time I would ask everyone who's able, please stand and remain standing for the benediction, singing of God Bless America, and the playing of taps. Almighty and eternal Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather here today to remember and honor these servicemen and women who served in the Vietnam War. Please bless all of our servicemen and women, first responders, policemen, firemen, and all those who still work tirelessly to protect us, our families, our communities, and our great nation. We also ask that you continue to bless all the men and women who serve in our armed forces. Please protect all of our guests today as they return home to their loved ones. Finally, we ask for your protection of all those still serving and protecting our nation in the war on terror. Amen. Amen. At this time, I would ask Colleen Mallour to lead us in singing God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Bugler, sound taps. I just want to recognize a few people that have helped to bring today's program to fruition. First of all, I want to thank my staff. Our office in Hatboro is the busiest office in the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We do more constituent work than any other office, and we're very proud of that. And that is due primarily because of my staff, Nancy Williams, Bill Dixon, Gina Rondinelli, and Patty Fleming, and they've done just an outstanding job putting today's program on. Many of you have, we can give them a round of applause. Special recognition to Patty Fleming. Many of you have interacted with Patty, and she just did an outstanding job with today's program. You can appreciate how complicated it is, not just putting the program on, but trying to work through security concerns. And we're very grateful, Colonel Griffin, for your staff and your unit cooperating with us. Thank you for that. I also want to thank Michelle Lockman and Brian Chung from Congressman Brendan Boyle, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick's office. Our vocalist, Colleen Malore from Hatboro, as you can tell, just sings superbly, and we're very grateful for Colleen. Thank you, Colleen. If you're curious, Colleen is a professional singer, so we're very happy to have her. Also want to recognize our bugler, Mark Facessa from Hatboro. Mark, thank you very much for being here. I want to thank Montgomery County Commissioner Joe Gale for coming here today. Thank you, Joe. I also want to thank my colleague, my friend, Senator Stuart Greenleaf. Could not be with us today, but he very eagerly helped us pay for the food, so we're very grateful. We want to recognize Senator Greenleaf. Also want to recognize my good friend, Coast Guard veteran, Tom McLaughlin, for the great help that he gave us today. Thanks, Tom. I want to thank Anita Fleming and all the Blue Star mothers for the great work that they have done, not just today, but for the great work that they do in helping our veterans. So I want to thank them for that. And of course, I want to thank Dave Christian and Ralph Galati, two true American heroes, for their service, not to our country, but their advocacy for their veterans. We all stand on their shoulders. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dave. So thank you very much. God bless you.